Today we're going to talk about some cultural aspects of the ancient Israelites. We're going to start with daily life. Now, the Torah placed importance on the family, and from the Torah we see the defined roles of fathers and mothers. One aspect of the Hebrews is that males were going to be in charge of the families. For example, if a father died, a son, even a teenage son, might be expected to lead the family. Mothers are going to be in charge of educating and raising the children. Education is going to be incredibly important, and it will be based on the teachings of the Torah. Mothers are going to go and teach their daughters how to run the house. Another thing that we've already talked about a little bit would be the kosher laws. These would be Jewish dietary laws. An example of this would be no dairy or meat together, no pork and shellfish. There are other more complicated ones, such as don't boil meat in its mother's milk, but for example that would be combining the meat and dairy. We saw this, of course, with our story of Hanukkah, when Antiochus IV tried to go and have the Israelites eat pork. Now, we're going to be reviewing some of that Greek rule from there. So, Alexander the Great, we haven't gotten to talk about him yet, but he's going to conquer a vast empire. He's going to start right here in Macedonia, and is going to wind up conquering Egypt, Asia Minor, Mesopotamia, the Persian Empire, going all the way to the Indus River. And what's going to happen with that is it's going to create a Greek civilization that people in Egypt and in Israel, where we're talking about, or Mesopotamia, Persia, they're going to be speaking Greek. And that's why we're going to have these Greek rulers like Antiochus IV eventually ruling over Israel/Palestine. Now, one of the things that happened also is, as Mr. Hanna told you yesterday, the Babylonians are going to conquer Judea, and they're going to spread the Jews throughout the Babylonian Empire. So this is going to have lots of Jewish people over in the city of Babylon here, but they're going to be throughout Mesopotamia. We're going to see Jews going further out all around in this region. So, because of Alexander the Great and because of the Babylonians, we're going to have Jews spread around, and they're going to be Greek speakers. So we're going to have a huge, important document being created because of this. It's called the Septuagint. We see it right here, Septuagint. Septuagint. Practice saying it. Now, the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. You might be thinking, Mr. Kenny, why does this matter? Why does it matter having the Greek translation of the Jewish Bible? And what's going to happen, why this is important, because so many people are going to speak Greek because of Alexander the Great. So, this is going to spread Jewish ideas throughout the whole entire Mediterranean region. So we're going to have it spread through Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt, parts of North Africa, and it's also going to even spread Jewish ideas throughout the rest of the Greek-speaking world. Now, as you read about, a man named Antiochus IV comes to power, and he is going to persecute the Jews. Now, Antiochus IV, he was not a great ruler. He was cruel. He was harsh. He had delusions of grandeur. He thought he was, I believe, like the reincarnation of Zeus or something along those lines, where he thought he was literally a god. And he is going to try to force the Hebrews to worship the Greeks' gods and goddesses. He's going to go and take the temple where the Jews worship God, and is going to try to make it a temple of Zeus. We have instances where Greek soldiers, like at the town of Modin, are going to try to force the Hebrew villagers to worship Greek gods and goddesses. And of course, we have the instance where they tried to force them to eat pork. And as you read about, we have the Maccabean revolt, where we're going to have the Jews fighting the Greeks. It's going to take 27 years for them to defeat the Greek occupation, for them to gain their freedom. Then, of course, at the culmination of this, the climax, we have our story of Hanukkah, of course, when the Jews, they return to the temple, they see it's been trashed, they see that the menorah that they want to light only has enough oil for one day, and we have the miracle of the oil, where the oil will last 8 whole days. And we see this happen in 164. This is when the Jews were victorious. And like we said, this is how we have our Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, celebrating the miracle of the oil and the victory against the Greeks. Now, unfortunately for the Jews, their independence is going to be short-lived. They're going to have less than 100 years before another group is going to come in. We're going to have the Romans coming in 63 BCE. Now, we haven't talked about the Roman Empire yet, but the Romans are going to be conquerors. They are going to dominate the land. And we're going to see a man named Herod the Great being placed as king of Judea. And he's going to build a temple in Jerusalem. Now, we're going to see a split in Jewish thought at this time. We're going to see several groups thinking of how they should act. The first are the Pharisees. You may have heard of them before. Now, the Pharisees put a strong emphasis on obeying the law. As we know, the Hebrews, they have the Ten Commandments as the basis of their law, but there are many other rules and laws found in the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Well, they were so concerned about following those laws that they would make extra laws in order to make it so they couldn't possibly even break the other laws. But for our purposes, you need to know that they did not support Roman rule. So they did not want the Romans ruling. They did not agree with Herod the Great. Now, we have another group called the Sadducees. Now, they are going to be similar to the Pharisees, as they believe in the written law, the laws of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. However, they felt the Pharisees went too far with the oral laws. They did not say those are from God, and that they should not be as stressed as importantly as the written laws. Now, they also were different than the Pharisees because they said, this isn't the best situation having the Romans ruling over us, but we should work with them. Alright, so they cooperated with the Romans. Now we have the Essenes. These were many priests, and they realized that the poo-poo was about to hit the fan, and they flee Jerusalem. And once again, they're like the Sadducees. They follow the written laws. They didn't follow the laws of man. But the Essenes said, these Romans, this is not going to go well. They leave, and they try to live off on their own. Now, they're going to be incredibly important because of them. We're going to have one of the most awesome archaeological discoveries for our Hebrews. It's going to be the Dead Sea Scrolls. So we believe they wrote these scrolls or had copies of them, and they were living up on the caves kind of near the Dead Sea, which they wound up burying them within these cliffs. And in the 1900s, we actually discovered these. And what was really cool is these were so super old documents of the Torah, much older than any of the things we had before prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Actually, our oldest examples of the Hebrew Bible were going to be the Septuagint, which were Greek written. And so that wasn't very old compared to how old the Torah was. So there are some people who were even saying, oh, well, the Torah, the Hebrew Bible, isn't that old, that it's, only as old as the Greeks. And people doubted the validity of it. But then the Dead Sea Scrolls showed much older documents. Now, our final group are the Zealots. They're going to actively fight against the Romans. They would go and often be martyrs. They would sacrifice their lives in order to go and fight and kill Romans. And this is going to take effect in 66 CE, where the Jews are going to rebel. They're going to fight the Romans, and they're going to, for 4 years, keep them out of Jerusalem. But eventually the Romans are going to bring in some heavy hitters, 60,000 soldiers, 60,000 Roman legions, legionnaires, excuse me, not legions. That would be way more. And in 70, CE, they're going to attack. They're going to destroy the temple, and all that's left today is the Western Wall. This is called the Wailing Wall. This is where Jews today even they come, they pray, they write down prayers and stick them in the cracks here. Often many people come, they're crying, they're upset, just seeing how ever since this time the Jews, their temple is destroyed, it's incomplete, and many of course were moved. We had our Babylonian exile, we have the Jewish diaspora here, where the Jews are scattered all across the Roman Empire. I'll show you a map soon. So if we thought the Babylonian exile was bad, where Jews were moved all over the Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire is larger, and more Jews are going to be scattered around. So here we see Jews going to Rome, throughout Greece, and we're going to see this is going to go even further along. These are major cities are in the big. We see Jerusalem, Alexandria, Rome. Other Jews are going to be in these smaller cities here. One of the big turning points of the Jewish world is Masada. Jerusalem is going to fall, but Jews are still going to fight against the Romans. So they go to this mountain fortress of Masada. It's up on a mountain, narrow path, very challenging for an attacking force to go up this narrow path and attack. And they last there for 3 years. Basically, the idea was hold the Romans off there, and hopefully, eventually, others are going to rise up against Rome. This doesn't happen, though. So, as the story goes, in 967 of the people there are going to go and kill themselves when the Romans are going and attacking, because they don't want the Romans to do it. It's a pretty heartbreaking story. There's been recent debate if this happened or not. There's a very fascinating National Geographic video which goes and talks about the different theories on it. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be getting into that today or with this class. But as the story goes, the Romans are about to take the city, and all of the defenders, including, unfortunately, families, so women and children that were there, are going to take their own lives to stop the Romans from doing it. All right, finally, we're going to see the preservation of Judaism with the Romans. It is this fantastic story of Rabbi Yohan ben Zakkai. He is going to fake his own death to get out of the city. He is going to go have a funeral. And of course, the funeral processions, they're going to take the coffin out of the body. So he's hiding in the coffin. The Romans actually let them out of the siege. And he escapes. And he's going to found a school to teach rabbis. And this is going to be very important because this is going to keep the Jewish traditions alive. And along actually with the diaspora. It's one of those things that it was a terrible event that the Jews were scattered. But they believed if there were 10 adult males, they needed to build a synagogue. We talked about this. Synagogue is a Jewish house of worship. And therefore, with the diaspora, it's actually going to wind up spreading and preserving Judaism, because Jews are going to now be all throughout the whole Roman Empire. So there we have it. We have the Greek occupation, the Roman occupation, and how those terrible events are actually going to lead to the spreading and preservation of Judaism. Sorry for the sore throat and the terrible voice. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.